So this morning I read a piece on Forbes titled "Farewell Toys R Us, We Will Miss You." And Brad Thomas goes over the statistics of Toys R Us, their 180 locations preparing to shut down, the oncoming bankruptcy, the inevitable closure of its 800 locations in the US, not to mention it has locations in the United Kingdom that have also been closing down. But I think 800 locations closing down is enough for me to make an argument. The Atlantic wrote another piece titled "Who Bankrupted Toys R Us? Blame Private Equity and Millennial Parents." And the subtitle goes, "The Retail Apocalypse for Legacy Brick and Mortar Companies Has Come to the Toy Business." So I'm not really going to rail on Amazon or Apple or any of these companies that have sort of reduced physical real estate through their success. I really wanted to touch more on the detrimental effect of technology for teaching and developing kids, and why Toys R Us is sort of an ominous precursor to that future. So Toys R Us announced on Wednesday that it's going to close about 180 stores in the U.S., or about one-fifth of its domestic locations. The company is also going bankrupt, to restructure $5 billion in debt. And Mattel and Hasbro sales have also gone down, obviously, alongside Toys R Us. On the Forbes piece, Brad Thomas touches more about the real estate implications, and I suppose I could talk about that another time. I'm going to focus on child development. The Wall Street Journal says Toys R Us considers closing all of its U.S. stores. So we can make an argument based on the 180 stores closing down, but there are 800 locations in the U.S., and I think that's plenty to make an argument on. Why is this happening? So the reason it's happening is because toys, physical toys, those sales are going down. And you can also see an increase in sales for things like the iPad, items like the iPad, smartphones, even the Kindle Fire, things like that, items like that. So these are replacing, to a large degree, physical or analog toys that children use. And you might be wondering, well, why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is because human beings grew up in a physical world. We have been in a physical world. We have occupied a physical world for our entire existence. And before Homo sapiens were even a thing, we have always occupied a material physical space. We have evolved in that space. That is the purpose for us having hands and arms and legs, and everything biological about us has a reason for it, right? That's a large part of the idea of natural selection, Darwinian natural selection, and evolution, is that everything we have was selected through pressure over eons and eons of time, right? They're ingrained in us. So development for a child, and I'm not going to talk about the debate about how important it is for children to play with physical toys in order to, how important that is for their development. I will argue that there is evidence, and that it seems obvious to me, that having an analog environment, having numerous analog physical items in an environment where children are playing, allows them to adapt and manipulate that environment, and that is beneficial to children. And why is that a bad thing for tablets? Well, tablets themselves occupy physical space, and children do have to manipulate certain control elements on an iPad in order for them to produce certain functions. However, you're touching a screen. Most of that analog interaction that you would get with building blocks, or a shovel and a bucket, or a kitchen set, or a toy box with plastic tools in it, or a toy that, where there are multiple pieces and a child has to put that together in order to form something. All of that is gone in a tablet. And it's not enough for a child to manipulate a 2D environment where they can put items together. That might help mentally in some aspect with, decision making or problem solving, what have you. It does not properly train a child in the use of their hands and other the use of their body to manipulate environments and to learn spatial recognition and to create a more realistic picture of the world they inhabit. And we see this, you see this with even adults who have grown up, maybe not with video games, people in their 40s who grew up, normal childhood, and now they may be addicted to PC games, right? And there is a complete removal of the analog environment. I would argue, and I'll argue in another video, why I think that leads to depression, especially for men, the lack of physical interaction with the environment in which you inhabit to produce some result or even just to exert energy. But, right, so what is my argument? My argument is that tablets are detrimental to a child's ability to learn how to manipulate their environment and spatial recognition, and also just the satisfaction we get in playing with analog items. I mean, computers have everything stored in them, right? And I know that when I use a new tool or when I use certain tools on a computer, it's satisfying, but there's nothing quite as satisfying as using a shovel, using a hammer, using a drill, operating a vehicle. When, in another video, when we eradicate the human-driven car, I think obviously accidents will go down drastically. Drunk driving accidents will become nil, they'll become zero, but we lose something. Every choice we make, every manipulation we make to the environment, everything we do to the human culture has a positive and a negative. And I think we will lose something with that ability to control this vehicle. But anyway, I digress. Here are some statistics I want to pull up on technology use and what we are, just how much kids use technology now. The Telegraph has a piece titled "iPad Generation Means 9 in 10 Toddlers Live Couch Potato Lives. Experts fear a bleak future for a generation of toddlers brought up on tablets and smartphones, with just 9% of preschool children taking a healthy amount of daily activity." So Laura Donnelly, she's a health editor, she goes over what's been happening over the past 10 years. The vast majority of preschool children, 84%, do not manage even 1 hour a day on the move. If people don't find this worrying, I don't know what will worry you. But so I'm on childdevelopment.com.au, areas of concern, their areas of concern page. I'd like to just read a little bit from there. This is titled Manipulation. What is manipulation? Manipulation skills refer to the ability to move and position objects within one hand without the help of the other hand. Manipulation is used when holding a puzzle piece, keys, writing, or even cutting with scissors. These are skills we sometimes take for granted. However, they all require the coordination of many skills for successful performance, including fine motor, muscle control, bilateral integration, coordination, hand-eye coordination. Why is manipulation important? Let's go ahead and skip over that. What are the building blocks necessary to develop manipulation? Hand and finger strength, hand-eye coordination, hand dominance, hand division. So that's using just the thumb, index, and middle finger for manipulation. Bilateral integration. So that's using two hands together with one hand leading. Postural control. The ability to stabilize the trunk and neck to enable coordination of the arm and hand for physical task performance, and body awareness or proprioception. Information the brain receives from our muscles and joints to make us aware of body position and body movement that then guides future controlled movements. Right, so many of us take all of these little manipulatory pieces that we use to simply move around the world, and we often take those for granted. And what you're seeing is that when kids are not using toys at all, and parents are deciding, well, the iPad can be the substitute parent for a little bit because it's just too hard, right? And if you're a parent, you can probably empathize with that position, but what you're going to see is a reduced development for these very important things. How can you tell if a child has problems with manipulation? If they use both hands for activities that usually only require one, appear clumsy when handling objects, are slow to complete activities requiring manipulation, they avoid activities requiring manipulation such as cutting, drawing, and doing up buttons and zips, prefer to get others to perform manipulation-based activities for them. So how many, and have poor pencil and scissor skills, how many kids do you know, if not your own kids, that will often do these things, right? And not only that, but so they'll ask their parents to tie their shoes for them. They have a hard time handling objects. They're slow to complete activities requiring manipulation. A lot of kids will just avoid doing those things altogether. They'll use both hands for activities that really should only use or require one hand. So the iPad, the tablet problem is only going to emboss or solidify those problems. So what also happens, and I'm still on this childdevelopment.com.au website that I'll link to, but what other problems can occur when a child has manipulation difficulties? So behavior. Children will become angry or frustrated when attempting to manipulate small objects. Self-confidence. Kids who have a problem with these manipulation tasks will have problems with confidence. Self-care, they might avoid some of the, for example, dressing, eating, cleaning teeth. They might avoid these things because it frustrates them. Poor fine motor skills, right? Finger and hand skills such as writing, cutting, opening lunch boxes, tying shoelaces, using a computer mouse, opening doors with a key, and construction. So activities such as Lego, block building, cut and paste. These are all very important. And if you can, that doesn't mean you should put a building block app on an iPad. It means kids need to manipulate building blocks or other toys that improve their manipulation of their environment and their ability to spatially recognize the space they're in. So enough of that page, I'll link to it. So I guess we'll talk a little bit about some of the pros because I don't want to come off as one-sided. Gizmodo wrote a piece, do tablets in the classroom really help children learn? 58% of U.S. teachers own smartphones, and there are certain movements aiming to get an iPad for every student in school. Right now, that looks like about 25% of U.S. schools have these policies in place, so trying to further the use of tablets in education. Pew Research survey asked a group of advanced placement of National Writing Project teachers about the educational impact of internet technology in the classroom, and this is what they said. 73% of teachers reported using mobile technology in their classrooms either through their own instruction or by allowing students to use it to complete assignments. 47% of teachers strongly agreed, and an additional 44% somewhat agreed that students need digital literacy courses to be successful academically and beyond. So that's good news for tablets, right? That's good news. PBS Kids, in partnership with the U.S. Department of Education, found that the vocabulary of kids ages 3 to 7 who played its Martha Speaks mobile app improved up to 31%. Abilene Christian University conducted research around the same time that found math students who use the iOS app Statistics 1 saw improvements in their final grades. Now, the education debate on testing and methods of education have been debated for quite a long time. I know a lot of people who, well, most people I talk to disagree with the core program. So again, if you're improving test scores in children, that does not mean that they are learning better, right? If you take a test, if you cram all night, you take a test, you get an 80%, and then you don't study that material, and you take the test just 1 week later, you're going to get a lower score because you're not teaching your brain to retain that information. You're simply, the brain's going to flush that information out, right? So rote memorization arguably helps for test taking, right? That's not going to help you in a career path where you need to retain information and quite a bit of information if you want to be a master in your field. So, I would agree with that tablets, and this, I guess I'll close and make this one point, that tablets can really help as a sort of hybrid service, right? So I'm not saying to, not have any tablets in the home, though I would say, and I'll say in a later video, that I don't think children should have smartphones. I think that's a little ridiculous. But anyway, tablets alongside physical analog items, toys, game boards, things like that. We need to have a hybrid of those two. We also need to educate parents on how to be mindful so that, watching a kid is not so burdensome to you that you throw a tablet in their lap and you sit on the couch and now your kid is 2 hours into a game they've been playing, right? And there's also a piece by parent.com, titled Taming the Toys Could Ignite Creativity. A number of German families, German daycare centers, are taking away all toys in order to reduce addictive behaviors in the future. There was a 1980 study when a study group found that adult addiction could be traced back to the habits formed in childhood. So I'm not advocating for this either. I'm not saying you should take away all toys and tablets so that children will manipulate their environment in different ways. Though this piece also argues that it's more about how many toys a kid has, right? And I'm making that point as well. Don't give your kid 100 analog toys. 20 toys is enough for them to manipulate their environment. Bring the kid outside. The whole thing is we live in the world. Therefore, by bringing your kid outside, they're going to manipulate, they're going to operate in that environment and learn how to operate very well in that environment. You get better at walking by walking. You get better at using a tool by using your hands. So, yeah, I'm not advocating for you to bring a bulldozer into your living room and dump thousands of toys onto the floor and not have a tablet. And I think if you can make some strict rules, maybe a 30-minute rule every day for tablet use, and that's probably reasonable. I don't know what other time amounts people would, advocate for or agree on. But 30 minutes seems to be a pretty decent baseline. And also, teachers, if they're going to be using tablets and certain tech in the classroom, I think there needs to be very strict settings on those iPads, restricting people from downloading certain apps without permissions, so that children are not downloading games. They're not downloading and watching a lot of YouTube videos, because we all know how easy it is to fall into a YouTube addiction, or to watch, one video and all of a sudden 2 hours has gone by. So, yeah, I would simply say that have some goddamn foundations put in place, some rules in place that protect your children from too much screen time. Meanwhile, also having teachers be educated in the effective use of those technologies and combining them with the traditional technologies we use to educate. So let me know what you think in the comments.